Thank you, girls, for coming over, of course. Jeff Blatnick. Jeff Blatnick and I were teammates.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Hi, Adeline.
Hi.
Congratulations on your win.
Thank you.
So tell me, what was it like in the finals? Did you know in advance that you were going to pull this off?
I don't know. It was definitely an exciting thing. I knew I was going to make it to the finals, and I was just ready to qualify the weight for Team USA. So it was more, that finals match was for me. You know, getting to be that world champion for one more time and one more year is just an amazing opportunity, and I'm just so excited that I pulled it out.
Are you the first woman in America to win 3 world titles?
No, Tricia Saunders has 4, but I am the first one to repeat, so 2 back-to-back years. So it's a pretty exciting opportunity.
Very great. Now you came to the dinner for the IFW commemorating 1980 Olympic team. In your thought process, do you think about the political agenda that is sometimes pulling against the wrestling community or the Olympic community, and how challenging it can be? I mean, where does your heart when you hear about the story of these men?
I mean, I couldn't imagine the position that they are in, and just understanding that they did not get the opportunity after how hard they worked. I know the effort that I put in. I could never imagine not being able to be able to step on that stage and accomplish my dream. So my heart's to those people who unfortunately had to suffer through those consequences, and it's just something I try not to think about, because it is something that would be very disheartening.
Well, you're right. You shouldn't have to think about it too much. And the IFW is here to help that process. So I asked you this question before, how important is it for the wrestling community to stick together? And when you see what this IFW is attempting to do right now, how do you feel about that, and how do you support it?
I don't really know what the IFW does, so I'm going to skip that question.
That's fine. Well, feed me alive, feed me alive. Okay, we're good. Thank you. Good luck.
At 180 pounds, America had what might be considered fine wine. But instead of getting better with age, Chris Campbell started out fine and then defined the aging process. So much so, he holds the world record in wrestling for athlete longevity, 15 years. He placed the first World Championships in 1977 and then placed 15 years later in the Barcelona Olympics. In those in between years, he won a World Championship and received Chris Campbell.
Next, Ben Peterson, Olympic champion, Olympic silver medalist, and no one, and I mean truly no one, has the ability, hopefully, maybe even still today, certainly had the ability to perform when he got his competition at a different level than you want to imagine. And that's what he did in the Olympic Games in 72, then again in 76, and I'm sure he would have again in 1980. But it was always good to have Ben on the team, because whenever anyone was having a bad day, you could just say, okay, you're going to a few takedowns with Ben. And in practice, everyone could take down Ben. It was just that no one could take him down when it came to the Olympic Games. And when I remember the little story, is probably for them when Wade talked about the transition between the two organizations, I mentioned that Myron Roderick had started this exchange with the Greek League, and then eventually the AAU, depending on your review, took it over and added the World Cup. And on that first team, Ben, John, and myself were on both teams. And Myron Roderick would call us and say, you have to go with our team. And I'd say, Myron, we were not going to be able to wrestle because of this. And I said, no, all we want to do is wrestle. And I remember Myron eventually blaming me. You're convincing John and Ben that we're all three people be a little bit more outspoken. But John and Ben aren't going to listen to me. There's only one person they listen to, and he's not here. And their faith played a big role, both in of course, course, in Ben, and if you would read his quote, you would sense that. Of course, Ben can be a little bit more philosophical about it because he won the gold and silver in the two Olympics before. And but again, proud to have been part of the team with Ben Hewitt.
At 96 kilos, or 220.5, catcher, as well as in character, Mr. Russ Hellickson. One of his favorite quotes was, "Influence is a precious thing. It's meant to be passed on." And that's exactly what Russ has done for the past 35 years, unselfishly sharing with others that which a sport and life has graciously given him. You can read about his many accomplishments in your programs, and to be sure, there were quite a few. Of his contributions, the total body of his work had influence not only on the people around him, but in the sport in particular. And for his 20 plus years in announcing the booth at NBC Sports, to being founding editor of the Crossface magazine, to Wisconsin State Chairman for USA Wrestling, to the head wrestling coach at Ohio State, who in 20 years at Ohio State, and now of course at the state which we're doing wrestling, and he's done them all very well. You know, he hasn't been able to do, and that's been in the last 20 years, is go live. But that's okay, most of us can't do this, live anymore either. But anyhow, representing or receiving the plaque on behalf of younger brother of Dave Schultz, Mr. Mark Schultz. I know we're getting late, but I'm talking about America's two Stradivariuses of officiating. The individuals who were the glue that bound together the delegation known as the 1980 Olympic team, Mr. Jerry Wager and Mr. Rick Tucci. Unfortunately, the first one I'd like to introduce, Mr. Wager, we lost 2 years ago at the age of 76. And, it's just not been the same to run events like this, World Championships, and not seeing him on the mat. Jerry spent about 4 decades in wrestling, and yes, he was more than successful. I can mention how he was honored by FILA as the recipient of their Gold Star for officiating, which is the equivalent of being a 3-star general in the military. But I'd rather talk about why he's a distinguished member in our National Wrestling Hall of Fame. It could have been that he was a heck of a good wrestler, but that wasn't it. Could be that he was a head coach for 7 World Championship teams, which included being part of the first American Greco-Roman team to beat the Russians in world competition, but that wasn't it either. What it is, though, is the best part of Jerry's life is the thousands of children he turned on to the sport while he was director of the wrestling program here at Las Vegas at the YMCA. As Al Bevilacqua often reminds me, if you want a lot of cream, you have to produce a hell of a lot of milk. And that's what Jerry knew instinctively. The key to America becoming successful in wrestling at the world level centers on getting more children involved in grassroots programming. Jerry believed from what we get, we make a living. From what we give, we make a life. That was his vision for wrestling and the basis behind his cultural nature and his willingness to give. We had hoped his wife Sheila would be here, his wife for 56 years, a woman who in history to officiate the very first one in the sport of wrestling in the Olympics, and also the first woman in history to achieve the highest international rank possible. That's the field of exceptional. She was going to be here except the word her family emergency kept her home from arriving this morning, so I'd like to ask Al Bevilacqua, if Al's still here, if he'd come up and accept his award to Jerry in their absence. Al, will you please? Next official. The second official we're honoring is Rick Tucci, a New Jersey Italian who is still officiating what Dan Gable was to coaching, known by his friends as the Tooch. Rick has officiated more than 60 world championships, including 6 Olympic Games, and has been the president of USA Wrestling Officials Association for over 3 decades. And by the way, he's also a member of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. Okay, got it, he's a big dog in international wrestling circles, but like Jerry, it wasn't unusual to see Rick flying back from Tehran or Azerbaijan on a Sunday, only to turn around.
The Roman team is lined up, and me and Gino are next to each other. Carter's right in front of us, Jimmy, with Roslyn and Amy. And frickin' Gino reaches over and puts his arm around the president. The whole Secret Service had a fit. Look at Gino. He's the only one who would do it. He goes, right on Jimmy Carter, right on the president. The Secret Service went nuts.
You should have done a little more than that.
And I got pictures of that. You have pictures of it? I got pictures of you actually with your hand on his shoulder. You want? Well, I'll plug me in or something. I'll
Yeah, and then he jumped away and said, I heard about your half-life.
Yeah, I mean, I have here. Just put it.
Get in there, Brian. Get in there. You guys were great. You guys look like all like brothers. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm a Christian, but I've always had Great Danes. Great Danes are too healed to continue on. I hug them, tell them how much I love them, and I let them be with sleep. And why should we deny that basic right to humans? Tom really suffered.
Well, my wife, I think, wouldn't have done this. Me and my wife.
Let's see some love between the two of you. I'm videoing right now. It's a video now. Say, Mom, I love you. Blah, blah, blah.
I love you, Mom.
All right. Thanks, guys.